Impact segment tonight, there is no question the far left is losing most of its policy battles these days. Public opinions polls show that. And the fringe left are not good losers. Their new tactic is that the folks are too dumb to understand the brilliant progressive agenda. Writing in Newsweek, Jacob Weisberg says, quote, "What may be the biggest culprit in our current predicament, the childishness, ignorance, and growing incoherence of the public at large." Writing in Time, Joe Klein says, "It's very difficult to thrive in an increasingly competitive world if you're a nation of dodos." And of course, there is Bill Maher.
What the Democrats never understand is that Americans don't really care what position you take. Just stick with one. Just be strong. They're not bright enough to really understand the issues.
Joining us now to react, Professor Marc Lamont, a bright man who teaches at Columbia University. All right, now, I have a couple of tacks here, but first of all, are we a nation of dodos?
I would never say something so elitist as, you know. Yeah. However, I do think we're a nation that's not always invested in the political conversation. I don't think we always look at the details, and I think we can be easily swayed, not so much by the fundamental ideas. But
easily swayed.
Absolutely.
See, here's my question. If we're the most powerful nation on earth, all right, and the most successful nation in the history of mankind, as I believe we are, how did that ever happen if we're a nation of dodos? If we're uninformed cretins, how did that happen?
Well, we're a nation that elects people to make decisions, not a nation of people that make decisions.
So it's the elite that has made us the most powerful nation.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying everyday people don't necessarily need to know the details of every piece of legislation.
They don't need to know micro, but they need to know what's going on.
I think they do, and I think many of the mistakes that we've made as a nation have happened because people aren't deeply invested in the issues. That's
so exactly you're almost agreeing with these pinheads.
Almost, but I don't think that the American people are stupid. I just think the American people don't always look at the details.
I think 50% of Americans are uninformed, and 50% are. But I also believe in the common sense.
So you think half
wisdom.
the country is dodos?
I don't think they're dodos. I said they're uninformed.
Oh, like me. Okay, so
they don't pay
page.
attention.
Yeah.
They watch television and computers, and they don't watch news or read a newspaper, so they don't really know. They're not stupid.
Right. I agree.
They're just you know, in a world that doesn't include public affairs and things like that. But this condescension that we hear, and you would say it was condescending.
There's
right?
something condescending about
Maher and all these guys.
Absolutely.
You'd agree. Okay, now what does that get the progressive cause? These are all progressive guys, all right? These are all far-left guys. Does that persuade anybody? Oh, that's right. We're all, Bill Maher, a nation of dodos, so we'll go and think like you do.
Well, it's certainly not good public relations for the progressive cause.
It doesn't persuade.
No, I agree. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take the truth value from that and move forward with it. I'll give you a perfect example. Last week, there was that major poll that said that all these Americans disagreed with health care. They disagreed with health care reform.
Yes.
And then when you went bit by bit, piece by piece, they agree with every bit of the legislation.
But it's those poll questions that you can get whatever answer you want. But let's get back to...
No, but I think it reflects a sentiment.
Wait a minute. Let's get back to the persuasion aspect. You would think that these progressives, Weisberg and Pearlstein from the Washington Post and Klein and Maher, you would think that they'd want people to go to their side, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why they're in business, to promote the progressive cause, okay? To persuade people they
may
have
disagree,
the
but
best deal. And then they go around and insult everybody. How does that persuade anybody?
Well, insulting people isn't the way to go, I agree.
But why do they do it?
Well, I think there's a general frustration that many of us...
They're frustrated.
I'm frustrated as well.
About what?
That the American people will oppose policies that act in their own best interests.
But maybe your policies don't.
But here's why I went back to the poll. When you went piece by piece of every bit of the legislation, the American people agreed with every bit of the legislation. But when you ask them...
It depends how the question is phrased.
But when you ask them, do you support health care reform, they say no.
Okay, wait.
Because there's a public relations campaign against it.
Here's how you go off the rails, all right? Did you see the talking points memo? Did you see it?
Of course.
Okay. And I laid out all the... And I could have been still doing it. I could give you 1,000 things that are going to go up as far as you paying taxes, me paying taxes.
Right.
You say, Obama can say, well, I'm not going to raise the income tax, and maybe he won't. But he's going to raise every other
state tax.
Yeah. Wait, just for a minute. So then, 76% of Americans, according to a Kaiser poll out today, want health care reform.
Yeah.
I want health care reform. You do, okay?
Right.
But we don't want to be bankrupt getting it. Don't you get that?
Every time that the American people oppose a bit of legislation, it's not because they're misguided, and it's not because they're stupid, and it's not because they don't get it. I agree with you to that extent.
Thank you.
But there are moments where the American people are disagreeing with a policy that acts in their own best interest, even by their own admission, because there's such a strong and organized campaign against these policies from the right. And the left has never been organized enough to push back.
Well, there's plenty of vicious websites on the left, and there's George Soros and Move On. And
never been organized, though.
Look, if you're not organized, that's tough.
Yeah.
You've got so much money that if you're not organized, you're a bunch of dodos. Okay? Pardon
That's
the
so
expression.
condescending and elitist.
And
I'm hurt. That hurt a
I'm
little bit.
saying, if you can't get it with control of the media and the
Control
internet
of the media,
and
no.
Soros pumping hundreds of millions of dollars in there, if you can't get organized, that's your fault. But I'm going to go back to one thing. I think the American people have a good dose of common sense. This country could not be as strong and powerful and successful as it is without the folks making it that way.
And you couldn't have millions of vulnerable and desperate and disadvantaged people if large chunks of the American populace were ignorant to what was going on. And that's the point. That's why you have people who still believe Barack Obama is a socialist, despite all evidence
What's
to the
the
contrary.
poverty rate in this country?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
10%.
It's a little higher.
90% of people are above it. That's a success.
You also have a large chunk of the working poor, which is more about another 20 to 23%. It's people who go to work every day and run out of money.
Even the poor in America live better than most of the middle class everywhere else.
As an American, that's not my standard. My standard is what's going on here.
All right, Marc Lamont, everybody. He is not a dodo.